everyone. I wanted to come on this week and talk about archetypes and why we would use them, how we would use them in our spiritual practice. What is the point of this whole archetypal journey, right? As I just released like archetypal activations inside of my Patreon group, these are really doorways, kind of opening up portals, threads of energy within ourself, right? I just spent this week finalizing everything for my book, Feminine Archetypes, and talking to other spiritual leaders in the community, basically, how we can use these archetypes and why we would want to. And I think there's still a lot of confusion. So I'm hoping, after this video, it will kind of clear all that up. So archetypes, from a very basic psychological understanding, right, were kind of made famous by Carl Jung back in the 1940s. And he kind of piggybacked off of Sigmund Freud's kind of this setting the unconscious, these things that basically drive us to behave the way we do, but we're not necessarily aware of it, right? And we see this a lot within storytelling too, is like these different archetypes. You see like the young, maiden in distress who needs to be rescued, or the hero's journey and the hero going through all of these obstacles, having to overcome all of these things, right, to get to like this end point. That is not at all what I mean when I talk about archetypes, right? I am not a psychoanalyst. I am not a psychologist. There's a book by Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes that basically, brought to light the wild woman archetype and kind of has made that famous. And I think has, from that, sprung up a lot of exploration within self around the wild woman, and around these stories and these myths that we kind of grew up with, and what they represent. And from my own research and everything, I see this in all of the myths within the goddesses, right? You see these archetypes within them. And that's basically what my book is all about, is these archetypes within the goddesses, within the divine feminine. So we see the lover aspect, right? In Aphrodite, Venus, Ishtar, Astarte, Isis, Inanna. They all have that similar thread within them, right? That fertility goddess, that creatrix, that sensual, sexual part of self that wants to be adored and desired and, just wants to feel pleasure, essentially. And then we see it in the warrior too, right? With like Athena and Freya and Sekhmet. Like there are these strong, beautiful women who are basically like, hey, don't mess with me, right? I am going to come down on you. There will be revenge, right? And a lot of these stories, they're basically told by humans and about gods, right? And there's a lot of human traits, a lot of human characteristics. So with that being said, there's also shadow aspects of all of these archetypes, right? The ones that aren't necessarily divinely aligned. And so that is something to take into consideration when we want to start exploring the archetypes within self, right? So I love to use archetypes in my own spiritual practice to really tap into the energy that I want to be feeling, tapping into that energy that I want to embody. So if I notice, for example, like I'm not, taking care of myself, I'm kind of running on empty and I need a little bit more self-love, I'm going to call on the lover. I'm going to invoke the lover. I'm going to work with goddesses who represent the lover. And I'm going to embody the lover within self, right? So I'm going to tap into that energy that feels really good. That energy that is all about love and embodying that love, right? And making myself feel beautiful, making myself feel worthy, making myself, feel comfortable and pleasurable and doing things that bring me joy, right? So that's why we'd want to work with the lover, right? That's why we'd kind of want to explore that within self. And when you kind of go into that thread, right? I call all the archetypes like threads of Shakti, right? It's all Shakti energy. They're just expressed differently. They feel differently because the lover is going to feel a lot different than the warrior, right? And these are just our two examples for the day, apparently. But, or I might be going into like, not that I'm going into board meetings, but it's like, or I might be, having a really difficult conversation with somebody who is not respecting my boundaries, right? And I need to be able to lay those boundaries and be like, listen, coming from a place of love, coming from a place of alignment, like I am saying this for the best interest of all of us, right? You need to respect me. You need to respect my boundaries, right? Or there'll be consequences, right? Or I'm going to have to take a step back, or we're not going to be able to communicate anymore, whatever it is, right? But when we need those times of strength and poise and like confidence, that's the warrior. So there are so many different archetypes, right? I just named 2, right? We're just talking about the lover and the warrior right now because apparently that is what wants to come through. But there are so many different energies. There's so many different threads of the Shakti, of the divine feminine energy that we can really explore. So it's really taking a moment to sit with, okay, how do I want to feel? Right? Looking at patterns and like things that keep showing up, and like maybe you kind of feel stuck or just in this like energy where it's just like nothing's moving, nothing's happening, right? And you can ask yourself, how do I want to feel? Right? What do I need more of in my life? What feelings do I want to invoke? Do I want to invoke feelings of joy and success and pleasure, right? That's the lover. The lover is all about our self-worth. It's all about our happiness, our desires, right? Or are we more masculine driven and we want, we have a huge project or a huge goal that we have in mind and we just want to stay focused, right? That's when we call them the Huntress. The Huntress is very goal driven. She's very like tunnel vision. Like I'm going to go after my prey. I'm going to go after that thing that I want, right? Without abandon. I don't care what anyone else says, right? And maybe that's just it. Maybe you're getting a ton of opinions, right? From everybody else. And it's like, it's making you really fuzzy and confused. And you want to like stay on that straight and narrow. You want to stay on that path. You want to stay on like that path to succeed. That is the Huntress, right? That's when we work with Artemis or Diana. That's when we call on like that energy of, okay, like I'm blocking out all the other noise. I'm staying in my lane, right? And I'm gonna see it through. I'm gonna make things happen for myself to prove to myself, right? The Huntress there's a level of not only preparation, but discipline, right? Self-discipline in order to stay on that path and stay focused on the goal ahead. I'm trying to think what other archetypes. One of the witch, right? I love working with like witch energy. I love working with dark goddesses personally because the dark goddess to me is one of power and transformation and liberation. I personally have had the most profound experiences when I work with Hecate, Kalima, the Morrigan, Caradwyn. I mean, there are so many beautiful lessons, right? And the dark goddess is one to kind of take us in to that shadow realm, take us into the unconscious, take us into, you know, that part of ourselves that we're not always willing to go to, right? That are like, we might be hesitant to dig up old wounds, old patterns, old things that like we had no idea, right? But the dark goddess is one to liberate us from all of that, right? To shine light on those shadows. And help us kind of reclaim, not only heal, but reclaim our power, reclaim our voice. The dark goddess is a great archetype to work with. And there are so many beautiful goddesses that represent that energy. But I started off by talking about the witch, and because the witch, to me, is kind of like part of that, I don't want to say shadow realm, but the witch is one of healing, of energy. She knows how to transmute energy, right? And use it to her benefit. The witch is a very powerful archetype. And I think it's why we see so many people declaring themselves witches now, right? Because they have recognized that they're no longer going to be persecuted. They're no longer going to be hunted down and hung or burned at the stake, right? That was past lives. That was ancestral wounds, and the witch has learned how to heal those and basically say, like, screw it. This is who I am, right? Take it or leave it. I'm not for anybody, like everybody. That's okay. And the witch is very sovereign and powerful, right, with that statement. And she's one, or he's one, who is for the oppressed. The witch, to me, is also an activist, right, working with witch energy. Not only are we, like, in tune with nature, and usually you'll see him working with, like, nature cycles, like the wheel of the year, herbs, like medicinal remedies, right? But the witch understands what it means to be persecuted, for just being who you are, right? For knowing, for having these esoteric gifts that not everyone always understands, right? And so the witch archetype is one who is going to step up and speak out for the oppressed. I think that's all I want to say with that. I mean, there's so many layers. There's so many layers to all of these archetypes, but what it comes down to is like, okay, how do I want to feel? Literally. Because in my own work, I've just noticed each of these archetypes within the divine, right? The divine feminine feels different. They all have this like unique energetic thread, right? So we've talked about the lover, the warrior, the huntress, the dark goddess, and the witch, right? So there's just 5 archetypes, but notice how I talk about each of them differently and how they all feel differently, right? They stand for different things. So I just gave you 5 examples. So 5 archetypes, but they all represent the feminine. They all represent the divine, right? They all represent the goddess, right? They're just expressed differently. And so that's what we talk about when we talk about like archetypal embodiment, right? Or why you would even want to work with archetypes in your, spiritual journey. It's because each of those archetypes, right? And each of the goddesses that represent those archetypes can teach us different things about ourselves. That's why I've been doing this whole time, right? For years now, exploring these different pieces of myself, right? And it's a tool to help us understand ourselves, to help us understand our energy, right? And you're not going to connect with all the archetypes, right? Some of them are going to be expressed a lot stronger than others, right? Some of us, depending on where you are in life, you might be more of a maiden than a mother, right? You might not feel into the mother. Might not be part of that cycle yet, right? Or you may be well past motherhood and you might be feeling more into the crone, the wise woman, right? But it's this cyclical journey that we go on. And each phase, we don't always stay within the same archetype, right? Even in my own journey. I mean, feeling into the beginning of this year, like the beginning of 2021, I was very focused on getting my book done. I was the Huntress, right? I had to set everything up, make sure everything was ready to go, make sure, my manuscript and my image for the cover design and all my logos, all of that, right? My website was set up. I was in preparation mode. I was in that Huntress, right? And then once I could kind of release all of that, and I saw that like it was kind of out of my hands at a certain point, right? There's only so much I could do until I passed it off to my editor and formatter and all that. Then I kind of went into the cycle of the queen, embodying my sovereignty and abundance and working a lot with abundance mindset for a while. And then there's always like those phases of like the mother and lover kind of intertwined in there, right? Within like my own personal life. And then I hit this like, I don't want to call it a snag, but it's like, then I went back into the shadows. Then I went back into the dark goddess. Then I felt called to journey back into that realm within self. And personally for me, it's like I'm coming out the other side of that. But that's in the span of 4 months. 4 months, 4 different archetypes, right? And it's just this cyclical journey, right? And I'm sure again in the fall, the dark goddess is going to come up because it's always kind of like her time of the year, like October, November, right? After the fall equinox. Because that's just a natural part of the cycle. Part of the wheel of the year. So it's not like when you're working with archetypes, you're like, okay, I see myself in this archetype. I am the lover through and through, or I am the maiden through and through. Well, maybe for a time being, right? But you're not just one thing. We are multidimensional beings. You can be the maiden and the lover at the same time. You could be the mystic and the lover at the same time, right? And the maiden is a natural progression to the mother, right? So I don't like to look at archetypes as labels, right? As identity labels, like, oh, I only see myself this way. I do not identify with the witch. I don't even want to touch the dark goddess, like that. I'm not ready for that, right? But that doesn't mean that those parts of you don't exist within self, right? If you're not ready to embody and work with those energies, that's perfectly fine. But all of the archetypes are within us, right? All of the archetypes are an expression of us, right? They're all part of self because they're all a part of the goddess. They're all a part of the divine feminine. And just being able to go in and just isolate that one thread of Shakti, that one archetype, right? That helps us to embody and invoke that energy, right? Like I was saying earlier, like if I'm in desperate need of some self-love and some self-care, right? And a reminder of like my own personal self-worth, then I'm going to work with lover energy to invoke those feelings, right? And to remind myself of the beauty of life, of, happiness and joy and pleasure. And when there's wounds to work through, right? There's probably like you find yourself just repeating the same, I don't want to call them mistakes, but like repeating the same patterns are playing out in your life over and over. And you're like, why am I still dealing with this stuff? I thought I was over this, right? that's when you call on the dark goddess. That's when you say, okay, let's go into the shadows. Let's go into the dungeon and kind of clear out the cobwebs. Let's go into that energy. And the dark goddess is your guide, right? She's the torchbearer. She's the one taking you on that journey and illuminating, the things in the dark that are keeping you stuck, that are hindering you from growing and progressing and evolving. So that's why we work with archetypes. To explore these pieces of self, right? To grow and evolve and remind ourselves that we are, part of the divine. We are a goddess. We are able to express ourselves on the fullest spectrum of being, right? And all of those parts of ourself, whether we're the warrior, the lover, the mother, the dark goddess, the witch, doesn't matter. Those are all part of us, right? Because again, we're not just one thing. And to be able to be connected to our truth, embody our truth, reclaim our truth, right? And be in alignment with our very soul essence, we have to be able to express all parts of self, right? We're not meant to be like caged into a little box. Like, oh, I'm just going to follow the rules. I'm just going to do what I'm told. I'm just going to, keep my head low and just try and get through this life. That is not a way to live, right? You're feeling boxed and caged in and stuck, then you need to embody the wild woman. Now I'm just throwing all the archetypes out there, right? But I go through 13 of them in my book. Feminine Archetypes is available now for pre-order on my website, CourtneyTiffany.com. And like I said, there's archetypal activations over on my Patreon group, the Monthly Goddess Alignment, to take you into those energies, right? To kind of help you invoke, help you tap into those threads of Shakti. Tap into that isolated energy of each archetype. Because they're all available, right? We just kind of suppress and ignore some of them. And so if you're looking to learn more about yourself, you're yearning to reclaim parts of yourself, that's the work you need to do. Learning how to embody the archetypes, tap into those energetic threads, right? And open the doors to this way of self-exploration, this dance with the divine. It's kind of what it is, right? Co-creating, dancing, tapping into this energy, the Shakti energy within self and with the divine, right? Because when we tap into that archetype, we are tapping into the most divine expression, the truest expression, the purest expression of that divine thread, of that divine archetype, right? Not the shadow, not the weird distorted version of it. We're tapping in with the highest, most aligned version. And that's why I work with goddesses. That's why I work with deities and archetypes, right? To align myself with the highest vibration of that essence, of that archetype, of that goddess. And connecting to it, right, within self. Awakening that part of yourself, that divine aspect of self, right? I'm just feeling into if there's anything else I want to add before I say sayonara. Hopefully that answers some questions, right? Hopefully that kind of gives you a better understanding of why even do archetypal activations or embodiment. But that's what it is. It's tapping into that divine energy, that divine expression, right? And embodying it and living from that place, right? And being more true to yourself because of it. So That's all I have for today. I will see you next week. If you have any questions, you can just drop them below. Bye.